The emergency beacon screamed across subspace channels, but no human ship responded. Ambassador Kelvin stood in the Galactic Council chamber watching the distress signal from the Vraxian colony flash red on the holographic display. 3 days ago, a rogue asteroid swarm had devastated their mining operations. Hundreds of thousands were dying. The Vrakians had always relied on human rescue teams for such disasters. Everyone did. Where are they? Council Director Thrain demanded, his crystalline form refracting anxious light patterns. The humans always answer within hours. Kelvin pulled up the communication logs with trembling hands. His species, the Kelvari, had served as intermediaries between humanity and the Council for 2 centuries. The last logged human transmission was dated 6 months ago. A simple formal message: humanity hereby withdraws from all Galactic Council operations, effective immediately. They left, Kelvin whispered. The chamber fell silent. Impossible, Thrain said. 50 billion humans across 200 worlds don't just vanish. But they had. Kelvin frantically searched the network. Human trading posts, closed. Human embassies, empty. Human patrol routes, abandoned. The vast infrastructure humanity had built across the galaxy stood vacant, automated systems maintaining basic functions, but no people remained. Check Earth, someone suggested. The probe data came back within minutes. Earth's orbital stations were dark. The planet itself showed minimal energy signatures. Population reading 0. They evacuated their homeworld? Thrain's voice cracked with disbelief. Kelvin found a data packet, 6 months old, buried in the archives. It was addressed to the Council, but had been automatically filed as low priority by the sorting algorithms. He opened it with a sense of creeping dread. The message was from Secretary General Lisa Hayes. Her image appeared calm and professional. For the past 50 years, humanity has requested fair representation on the Galactic Council. We have been the primary responders to every major crisis, provided 80% of all disaster relief, maintained the largest peacekeeping force, and contributed more to galactic infrastructure than any 3 other species combined. Yet we hold only observer status. Kelvin remembered the countless sessions where human proposals were dismissed, their warnings ignored, their expertise questioned despite proven results. He had watched it happen, said nothing, done nothing. Hayes continued. We have been called warlike, aggressive, and dangerous. Our culture has been restricted. Our colonies have faced discriminatory regulations. Our people have been treated as useful servants but never equals. We have endured this because we believed in the dream of galactic unity. The Secretary General's expression hardened. That dream is dead. Humanity will no longer subsidize a system that treats us with contempt. We are leaving. We are taking our ships, our technology, our knowledge, and our people somewhere you will never find us. Do not follow. Do not search. Consider this our final courtesy. We are telling you we're leaving, which is more consideration than you ever showed us. The message ended. The Vraxian distress signal continued to pulse. Their rescue ships would take 3 weeks to arrive. 15,000 Vraxians would die in that time. Human ships could have been there in 18 hours. Send our fastest vessels, Thrain ordered. Director, the military coordinator, spoke up hesitantly. The humans maintained 70% of our rapid response network. Without their relay stations, our fastest ships need 8 days to reach Vraxian space, and that's just the closest crisis. We have 17 other ongoing emergencies that humans were managing. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Kelvin stood frozen, watching the galactic map. Every human world showed the same status: evacuated, not conquered, not destroyed, simply abandoned. They had picked up 50 billion people and left without a trace. The worst part wasn't that they left, it was how completely they had prepared. Every human-dependent system had backup protocols, automated handoffs, detailed instructions for continuation. They hadn't sabotaged anything. They had simply removed themselves from the equation and let everyone else deal with the consequences. Thrain turned to Kelvin, desperation clear in his voice. You worked closely with them. Where would they go? Kelvin thought of Commander Jake Morrison, his human counterpart for 15 years. A good man, patient despite everything. They had shared meals, discussed philosophy, even called each other friends. 6 months ago, Jake had shaken his hand, smiled sadly, and said goodbye. Kelvin had thought nothing of it at the time. "I don't know," Kelvin admitted, "but knowing humans, they planned this for decades." "They're gone, Director. Truly gone." The Vraxian signal continued to scream into the void, unanswered. The Galactic Council had always assumed humanity needed them more than they needed humanity. As the first reports of collapsing supply chains, delayed emergency responses, and failing infrastructure systems began flooding in, the Council members finally understood their catastrophic mistake. Humanity hadn't needed the Council at all. The Council had needed humanity. And now, humanity was gone. Director Thrain stared at the emergency display as more distress signals joined the first. The galaxy was burning, and the firefighters had quit. The council chamber descended into chaos as each species representative realized what humanity's departure meant for their own worlds. Arguments erupted, accusations flew, but beneath it all was a growing, terrible certainty. They had driven away the one species holding everything together, and there was no getting them back. Kelvin closed his eyes and remembered Jake's last words. "We tried to stay. We really did. But you can't force people to accept you, and you can't keep giving when others only take. Goodbye, friend. I hope you figure it out someday." Now, 6 months too late, Kelvin understood perfectly. Director Thrain collapsed into his seat, the weight of civilization crumbling around them visible in every line of his crystalline body. The emergency signals kept coming, each one a reminder of humanity's absence. Within hours, they would need to explain to the galaxy that their most reliable protectors had simply walked away. The explanations wouldn't matter. The damage was already irreversible. Kelvin looked at the empty space where human delegates once sat and felt the full enormity of what the Council had done. They hadn't just lost allies. They had lost the very foundation their society rested upon, and they had been too blind to see it until it was far too late. The evacuation hadn't been immediate, Kelvin realized as he dug deeper into the archive data. It had taken decades of careful planning. Humanity had slowly, methodically prepared for this moment while maintaining their obligations until the very end. They had built hidden colonies, developed independent supply chains, created new technologies they never shared. When they finally left, it was surgical, complete, and utterly final. The galaxy had thought humans were dependable. They were wrong. Humans were patient, and their patience had just run out. As Thrain began drafting emergency protocols and the Council descended into recriminations, Kelvin accessed one final file. It was a personal message Jake had left for him, time-locked to open after humanity's departure. The text was simple. "I'm sorry it came to this. We wanted it to work, but we couldn't stay where we weren't wanted. Take care of yourself, Kelvin. Maybe one day things will be different, but that day isn't today. Goodbye." Kelvin deleted the message and turned to face the chaos of the council chamber. Whatever happened next, the galaxy would have to face it without humanity. They had made that choice, vote by vote, insult by insult, dismissal by dismissal. Now they would live with the consequences. The Vraxian distress signal finally went silent. 15,000 voices suddenly gone quiet. 3 weeks after humanity's departure became public knowledge, the Galactic Council faced its first major test. The Drakemore Sovereignty, a regional power that humanity's peacekeeping forces had kept in check for decades, launched simultaneous invasions of 4 neighboring systems. Without human military support, the Council's response was fragmented and slow. 2 systems fell within days. Kelvin watched the military briefings with a sick feeling in his stomach. The human peacekeeping doctrine had been elegant in its simplicity. Overwhelming force deployed so rapidly that conflicts ended before they truly began. The Council's replacement strategy involved committees, debates, and cautious deployment of insufficient forces. It was a disaster in slow motion. "We need to find them," Council member Yara insisted during an emergency session. The insectoid representative's mandibles clicked with agitation. "Humanity has ships, weapons, trained personnel. We can negotiate their return." "With what leverage?" Kelvin asked quietly. "We have nothing they want, that's why they left." The Council had already sent exploration teams to every known human world. All they found were empty cities, functioning infrastructure, and automated messages politely directing visitors to leave. No clues, no trails. 50 billion humans had somehow vanished into the vast darkness between stars. Admiral Chen of the Calvary Defense Fleet appeared via hologram. His species had worked closely with human military forces. "Director Thrain, I must report that our combat effectiveness has dropped by 60%. Human tactical support, intelligence sharing, and rapid deployment capabilities were integrated into every aspect of our operations. Without them, we're essentially flying blind." "Then we adapt," Thrain said, but his voice lacked conviction. "We managed before humanity joined the galactic community."
"That was 800 years ago," Chen replied.
"The galaxy has changed. We've grown dependent on systems we didn't even realize we were using. Human communication networks, human medical protocols, human agricultural techniques. It's everywhere, and it's all starting to fail." Kelvin had been conducting his own investigation. What he discovered terrified him. Humanity hadn't just maintained obvious systems like rescue operations and military support. They had quietly become the backbone of galactic civilization in 1,000 subtle ways. The universal translation protocol that allowed different species to communicate seamlessly, developed and maintained by human linguists. The subspace relay network that enabled faster-than-light communication, built on human quantum theory and maintained by human technicians. The standardized medical database that helped doctors treat multiple species, compiled by human researchers over 2 centuries. Even the Council's own computer systems ran on human-designed operating systems. The galaxy had been using human innovations for so long that no one remembered they were human innovations. They had simply become the foundation everyone built upon. Now that foundation was cracking. Kelvin presented his findings to the Council. The silence that followed was profound. "This can't be accurate," Thrain said finally. "You're suggesting our entire civilization is built on human contributions." "Not built on," Kelvin corrected. "Reinforced by. Humanity didn't create galactic society, but they became its primary maintenance crew. And we never acknowledged it because they made everything look effortless." The Drakmor sovereignty captured a third system. Refugee ships began flooding Council space, overwhelming aid stations. Food shipments were delayed because human agricultural coordinators weren't managing the logistics networks. Medical supplies ran short because human manufacturers had produced 60% of all pharmaceuticals. Power grids flickered on outer colonies because human engineers weren't maintaining the fusion relay stations. Kelvin watched it all unraveling and remembered a conversation with Jake from 5 years ago. They had been discussing human frustration with Council politics over drinks. "You know what the worst part is?" Jake had said. "It's not the lack of recognition. We didn't do this stuff for medals. It's that they think we're too primitive to have feelings about it, like we're some eager species of workers who just love to serve. We're people, Kelvin. We get tired, we get hurt, and eventually we reach our limit." Kelvin had nodded sympathetically, but hadn't truly understood. Now he did. Humanity had been screaming for help in the only language the Council understood. They left. The economic collapse started in the 4th week. Human trading corporations had connected distant markets, created efficient supply chains, and provided liquidity during economic downturns. Their sudden absence created a cascade of failures. Stock markets crashed, banks collapsed. Trade routes that had been profitable for centuries suddenly became economically non-viable. Director Thrain established emergency committee to manage the crisis. It accomplished nothing. Every solution they proposed required resources, expertise, or infrastructure that humanity had provided. The committee spent more time arguing about blame than solving problems. "This is what they wanted," Council member Vex declared bitterly. They sabotaged us. They didn't sabotage anything, Kelvin snapped, his patience finally breaking. They held everything together while we insulted them, restricted them, and treated them like servants. Then they left, and we're discovering that we can't function without them. That's not sabotage. That's consequence. Thrain silenced the ensuing argument. Assigning blame helps no one. We need solutions. But there were no easy solutions. The Council could hire other species to fill human roles, but training would take years. They could attempt to reverse engineer human technology, but the humans had taken most of the advanced specifications with them. They could try to rebuild independent systems, but that required time and resources they didn't have while multiple crises demanded immediate attention. Kelvin spent his nights reviewing old Council records, tracing the pattern of humanity's treatment. The evidence was damning. Every human proposal for equal representation, rejected. Every human request for cultural recognition, denied. Every human achievement, downplayed or credited to collaborative efforts. The humans had given everything and received nothing but contempt in return. He found a speech from 80 years ago delivered by Human Ambassador Nicole Parker during a failed petition for full Council membership. Her words resonated painfully across the decades. We do not ask you to love us. We do not demand gratitude. We simply request the basic dignity of being treated as equals in a community we have served faithfully. If you cannot grant us that simple courtesy, then we must question whether this community deserves our continued service. The Council had voted down her petition by a margin of 47-3. Kelvin's own government had voted against it. They felt ashamed of that now, but shame changed nothing. The damage was done, and it was irreversible. By the 6th week, organized resistance to the Drakmor sovereignty had essentially collapsed. The invading forces captured system after system, their fleets encountering only token opposition. The Council's military forces, trained to work alongside human units, floundered without that support. Commanders accustomed to human tactical intelligence and rapid response capabilities found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed. Admiral Chen delivered another grim report. The sovereignty has taken 11 systems. At their current pace, they'll control the entire Outer Rim within 3 months. Without human peacekeepers, we have no force capable of stopping them. Then we negotiate, Thrain said. We offer the sovereignty trade agreements, recognition, whatever they want to stop the expansion. They want territory, Chen replied, and they know we're weak. Why would they negotiate when they can simply take what they want? The answer, of course, was that they wouldn't. The Drakmor sovereignty had been testing Council defenses for decades, probing for weaknesses. Humanity's peacekeeping forces had consistently demonstrated overwhelming capability deterring aggression through strength. Now that deterrent was gone and predators across the galaxy were noticing. Kelvin received a message from his government. They wanted him to return home. The Kelvari homeworld was preparing its own independent defense systems, no longer trusting the Council's ability to protect member species. It was the beginning of fragmentation, Kelvin realized. Without humanity's unifying presence, the Council itself might not survive. He drafted his resignation but didn't submit it yet. Someone needed to bear witness to this disaster, to ensure the truth was recorded for future generations. If there were future generations, the communication network experienced its first major failure in the 7th week. A primary relay station in the Andros sector went offline, cutting faster than light communication between 300 systems. The station required specialized maintenance that only human technicians had been trained to perform. Council engineers were trying to learn from instructional manuals, but the complexity was overwhelming. Kelvin volunteered to lead the repair mission. It gave him something to do besides watch the galaxy burn. The team arrived at the relay station to find it even worse than reported. Critical systems were failing throughout the structure, cascading errors that human engineers would have prevented with routine maintenance. How did they maintain all of this? One of the Kelvari technicians asked, staring at the vast array of equipment. There were only 40 humans assigned to this station. They were efficient, Kelvin replied, and they actually understood the systems they built. We're just trying to keep it from exploding. It took them 3 weeks to restore partial functionality. The relay station was operating at 30% capacity, enough for essential communication but inadequate for normal traffic. Across the galaxy, dozens of similar stations were experiencing the same degradation. The Galactic Communication Network, humanity's gift to civilization, was dying through simple neglect. When Kelvin returned to the council chambers, he found the situation had deteriorated further. The Drakmor sovereignty had captured 18 systems. Food riots had broken out on 7 core worlds. 3 member species had withdrawn from the council entirely, declaring they would manage their own affairs. The dream of galactic unity was crumbling. Director Thrain looked decades older, his crystalline form dimmed and fractured with stress. Ambassador Kelvin, I need you to be honest with me. Is there any way to bring humanity back? Kelvin considered lying, offering false hope. But Thrain deserved the truth. No, Director, even if we could find them, which we can't, why would they return? We haven't changed. We're still the same council that rejected them, still the same species that treated them with contempt. They're not coming back because they've finally realized they don't need us. They never did. Thrain nodded slowly. Then we're doomed. Perhaps, Kelvin said, or perhaps we learned to stand on our own. Humanity didn't make us weak, Director. They just made us comfortable. Now, we have to remember how to be strong without them. It was a noble sentiment, but Kelvin didn't believe it. The galaxy had grown too dependent, too complacent. Humanity had been the immune system of galactic civilization, and without them, every infection was becoming fatal. The Council might survive in some diminished form, but the golden age of galactic cooperation was finished. That night, Kelvin accessed the last personal message Jake had sent him months before the evacuation. It had been casual, asking about Kelvin's family, discussing plans for a fishing trip they never took, normal conversation between friends. Jake had known even then that he was saying goodbye. He had been kind enough not to make it obvious. Kelvin composed a message and sent it to every known frequency, hoping against hope that some human monitoring station might receive it. The message was simple. We understand now. We're sorry. We wish you well. He knew it would never be answered. Humanity had said goodbye, and they meant it. They had walked away from the galaxy that rejected them and built something new somewhere beyond reach. Kelvin hoped they were happy wherever they were. They deserved happiness after what they had endured. The Galactic Council would continue, stumbling forward through crisis after crisis, slowly learning to function without the species that had held everything together. It would take generations to rebuild what humanity had provided, if they ever managed it at all. The galaxy would be smaller, darker, less hopeful than it had been. But it would be the galaxy they had chosen when they rejected humanity's partnership. They had made their bed with contempt and arrogance. Now they would lie in it, alone in the dark, while somewhere distant, 50 billion humans built a better future without them. Kelvin filed his resignation and booked passage home. The Galactic Council could collapse without him. He had work to do on his own world, preparing his people for the difficult years ahead. The age of humanity was over. Whatever came next, they would face it without the species that had saved them more times than they could count. As his ship departed from the council station, Kelvin took one last look at the chamber where humanity had pleaded for recognition and received only rejection. Empty seats stared back at him, a memorial to opportunity wasted and friends abandoned. The lights flickered, another small failure in the cascade of system breakdowns. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, humanity was thriving. Kelvin was certain of that. They were too resourceful, too determined to fail. They had survived on Earth for millennia before meeting alien species. They would survive now, far from the galaxy that had spurned them. The rest of them would have to survive too, if they could, without humanity to save them this time. The thought was terrifying and strangely appropriate. The Galactic Council had finally gotten exactly what they wanted, a galaxy without human interference. They were discovering far too late that they should have wanted the opposite. Kelvin closed his eyes as his ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, leaving the dying council behind. Ahead lay his homeworld, his family, and the hard work of preparing for a darker future. Behind lay the empty chambers where humanity once stood, ghosts of what might have been if anyone had simply treated them with the respect they deserved. The galaxy would remember this lesson, Kelvin thought. Though it would be written in suffering and failure, future generations would understand the cost of taking others for granted. They would learn, eventually, that strength comes not from using others but from standing together as equals. But that lesson came too late for the Galactic Council. Humanity had departed, silently and completely, taking with them the future that might have been. What remained was consequence, crisis, and the slow recognition of a catastrophic mistake that could never be undone. The ship's navigation system reported smooth travel. Unlike the Council's crumbling network, Kelvin's vessel used older, pre-human technology. It was slower, less efficient, more expensive to maintain. But it worked without requiring human expertise, and in the new galaxy, that was all that mattered. They would learn to live with less, to struggle with problems humanity had solved. They would adapt because they had no choice. Director Thrain's final broadcast came through as Kelvin approached his homeworld. The message was meant to reassure the galaxy, but it had the opposite effect. Thrain spoke of resilience, of overcoming challenges, of galactic unity, but his words rang hollow. Everyone knew the truth. They had destroyed the very unity he praised when they drove humanity away. Kelvin landed on his homeworld and walked into his family's dwelling. His mate Sarah embraced him. "It's really over, isn't it?" she asked. "Yes," Kelvin said. "Humanity is gone. We're on our own now." Were they really that important? Kelvin thought about Jake, about the countless humans he had worked with over the years. Patient, dedicated, endlessly capable despite the disrespect they faced. More than we ever acknowledged. More than we deserved. The news feeds were full of speculation about where humanity had gone, whether they might return, what the Council should do next. Kelvin ignored it all. The answers didn't matter. Humanity was gone, and they weren't coming back. The galaxy would have to accept that reality and move forward, diminished but wiser, if they survived long enough to apply that wisdom. Kelvin reported to his government the next day. They wanted his assessment of the Council's viability. He gave it honestly, minimal. Without humanity, the Council lacked the capability to fulfill its core functions. Member species would increasingly handle their own affairs, rendering the Council irrelevant. Within a decade, it would likely dissolve entirely. "Then we prepare accordingly," the Prime Minister said. "We build our own defense forces, secure our own supply chains, establish our own diplomatic relationships. We survive." "At what cost?" Kelvin asked. "We'll spend the next century rebuilding systems humanity created in years. We'll fight wars they would have prevented. We'll watch millions die in disasters they would have resolved, all because we were too proud to treat them as equals." "Perhaps," the Prime Minister acknowledged, "but dwelling on past mistakes helps no one. We move forward with what we have." It was pragmatic advice, but it felt like surrender. The galaxy was accepting defeat, adjusting to a new reality where human absence was simply a fact of life. Within a generation, young people would grow up never having known humanity's contribution. The story would fade, becoming just another historical footnote. Kelvin couldn't accept that. He began compiling a comprehensive record of humanity's involvement in galactic affairs. Every rescue operation, every peace treaty, every technological advancement, every act of service. Future generations would know what had been lost even if they never got it back. The work consumed him. Thousands of incidents, millions of lives saved, countless innovations documented. The pattern was undeniable. Humanity had been the galaxy's greatest benefactor, asking for nothing but respect in return. And the galaxy had denied them even that simple courtesy. 6 months after humanity's departure, the Drakmor sovereignty controlled 40 systems and showed no signs of stopping. The Council's military forces had essentially given up on direct confrontation, focusing instead on defending core worlds. Millions of refugees flooded into already strained systems. Humanitarian crisis multiplied faster than aid organizations could respond. The Vraxian colonies that had sent the first distress signal Abandoned. The survivors had evacuated to safer systems, leaving behind 3 centuries of development. It was happening everywhere: retreat, collapse, fragmentation. The galactic community was unraveling without humanity's stabilizing presence. Kelvin completed his historical record and transmitted copies to every major archive in the galaxy. It would survive even if the Council didn't. Future civilizations would read it and understand what had happened here. They would know the cost of arrogance. A message arrived from Director Thrain. It was brief. Ambassador Kelvin, you were right about everything. I wish I had listened. If you ever speak with humans again, tell them I'm sorry. Tell them we all are. Thrain. Kelvin filed the message with his other records. Apologies meant nothing now. Humanity didn't need the Council's regret. They had moved on to something better, somewhere beyond reach. The galaxy's sorrow was just another burden they had finally put down. The seasons changed on Kelvin's homeworld. Life continued despite the chaos spreading through the galaxy. His people adapted, struggling but surviving. The Calvary had always been resourceful. They would endure this crisis as they had endured others throughout their history. But it would never be the same. Every struggle reminded them of how much easier things had been with humanity's help. Every loss highlighted what their pride had cost them. The knowledge was a constant weight, a reminder of opportunity wasted and friendship betrayed. Kelvin wondered sometimes about Jake, about what humanity was building in their new home. Were they happy? Did they ever think about the galaxy they left behind? Did they regret leaving, or did they celebrate their freedom? He hoped they were happy. After everything they had endured, they deserved peace and prosperity. They deserved to build a civilization that valued them, that treated them as equals, that recognized their contributions. The galaxy had failed to provide that. Whatever humanity created now would be better than what they left behind. A year after the departure, Kelvin received an unexpected message. It came through old communication channels routed through dozens of relays to obscure its origin. The message was from Jake. Hey, Kelvin, I hope you're doing well. I heard about your historical project. Thank you for that. People should know the truth, even if it doesn't change anything. We're doing fine out here. Better than fine, actually. We found a place where we can build something new, something better. No councils, no politics, just people working together because they want to, not because they're obligated. We miss some of what we left behind. Good people like you, mostly. But we don't regret leaving. It was necessary. Take care of yourself, friend. Maybe someday, if things change, if the galaxy learns to treat people with respect, we might come back. But not in our lifetime. Good luck with everything. You're going to need it. Jake. Kelvin read the message 3 times before deleting it. Jake was right. The galaxy would need luck to survive what was coming. But they had made their choices, and now they lived with the consequences. He looked up at the night sky, at the countless stars representing countless worlds. Somewhere out there, 50 billion humans were building their future. The galaxy had lost its greatest ally through its own arrogance. That loss would echo through the centuries, a cautionary tale about the cost of taking others for granted. The Galactic Council would eventually collapse. New power structures would emerge. Wars would be fought, territories would change hands, civilizations would rise and fall. Life would continue, as it always did. But it would be diminished, reduced, limited by the absence of the species that had once held everything together. Kelvin returned to his work, documenting the decline, preserving the truth for future generations. It was all he could do. The galaxy had made its choice when it rejected humanity. Now they would all live with that choice in a darker, smaller universe than it needed to be. Humanity had departed silently, leaving behind only empty stations and fading memories. The Council realized its error too late, when the damage was irreversible and the humans were beyond recall. It was a tragedy of cosmic proportions, written in the collapse of civilization and the suffering of billions. And somewhere distant, humanity thrived, finally free of the burden they had carried for so long. They had given the galaxy everything and received nothing in return. Now they would keep everything for themselves. building a better future far from those who had spurned them. The galaxy would remember humanity's departure forever, but that memory would bring no comfort, only regret for what might have been if anyone had simply shown them the respect they deserved. The lesson was learned, but learned far too late to matter. Kelvin closed his files and looked at the empty sky. "Goodbye, humanity. Thank you for everything. We're sorry we couldn't appreciate you while you were here." The thought was sincere but pointless. Humanity was gone and they weren't coming back. The galaxy would have to face its future alone with only the consequences of its mistakes for company. The lights flickered again, another system failing without human maintenance. It was becoming routine now, this slow decay. The galaxy adjusted, accepted, endured. They had no choice. They had driven away their salvation and now faced the darkness without them. Somewhere in that darkness, humanity was laughing, or crying, or simply living their lives free at last from a galaxy that never deserved them. Kelvin hoped it was laughter. They had earned that much at least. The story of humanity's departure would be told for generations. But it would always end the same way, with an empty chamber, a silent departure, and a galaxy realizing its error far too late to make amends. It was a tragedy without redemption, a mistake without correction, a loss without recovery. And it was exactly what the Galactic Council had chosen when they rejected humanity's partnership. They had made their bed with arrogance and contempt. Now they would lie in it, alone in the dark, while humanity built a brighter future somewhere beyond their reach. The end came not with drama, but with quiet acceptance. The Council continued in name only, a hollow structure without substance. Member species pursued their own interests, cooperating only when absolutely necessary. The dream of galactic unity died slowly, strangled by the very pride that had driven humanity away. Kelvin finished his historical record and transmitted it one final time. The truth was preserved now, locked in archives across the galaxy. Future generations would read it and understand what had happened. They would know the price of arrogance. Whether they would learn from it was another question entirely, but at least they would know. That was all Kelvin could give them. To the rest was up to the future, and a galaxy learning to live without the species that had once been its greatest strength. Humanity had departed. The Council had realized its error too late, and the galaxy would never be the same again.